What if the next U.S. offshore oil and gas lease isn't happening in some distant ocean you've never heard of, but in waters that feed families, support salmon runs, and are home to one of the most endangered whale populations in North America? Today's conversation takes us to Cook Inlet, Alaska, where decisions being made right now could lock communities into another generation of fossil fuel dependence or finally open the door to a different future. We're going to talk about this on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, marine biologist and science communicator, here to tell you what's happening in the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And this is another interview in a series of interviews that I've done for the U.S. oil and gas lease plan, a 5-year lease plan that was put out just before the holiday season so that a lot of people couldn't publicly comment. The public comment period is still open till January 23rd. This is going to be released sort of on the Monday before that. And so I want you to get an idea of how people in Cook Inlet and in Alaska feel about this oil lease plan. And what you're going to find out is very, very surprising, because we have Jamie Curry, who's the communications director of Cook Inletkeeper, and we have Lauren Barrett, who's the co-executive director of the Inletkeeper. They're part of an organization that has spent decades defending Cook Island watershed from pollution, climate impacts, and unchecked industrial expansion. So in this conversation, we unpack the U.S. offshore oil and gas leasing plan, the 5-year plan, and what that actually means for Alaskans who live, who fish, and raise families along these waters. We talk about how the oil and gas industry has shaped Alaska's economy, politics, and public expectations in the past, and why that history still influences how people feel about drilling today. So most importantly, we explore a question that often gets lost in the national energy debates. Do the people most affected by offshore drilling actually support expanding it into the future? And are they asking for something different altogether? This episode is about power, it's about legacy, and who gets to decide the future of Alaska's ocean. And I want to reiterate the importance of what this is going to mean for coastal people across the U.S., not just Cook Inlet, but even just specifically for Cook Inlet, because there's a website that they have up, and I'm going to link to it at speakupforblue.com/Inletkeeper. It's in the show notes. It's very important that you go see this. There is an image in the timeline that they talk about what's been happening that is so impactful to me, because it looks at how the leases are going to be expanded or are going to be put and where they're located in Cook Inlet. And if you haven't seen like what this looks like, it's got a mouth to the ocean, and then it's got this sort of like track that goes into, as an inlet, basically there's land on one side and land on the other side, like the major mainland on the other side. And it goes all the way in, quite a distance, a number of kilometers in. Where they want these leases are right in the mouth of the inlet where people live. Like Homer, where is home of the headquarters of Inletkeeper. They actually live there. So what they're going to see right now, what they see without these leasing plans and without these platforms, they look out their windows and they see beautiful like mountains and volcanoes and a beautiful skyline with the ocean in front of it. And they just see beauty. Wildlife as you've never seen before. They get to see it each and every day. It's why people who visit, just like Lauren Barrett did and just like Jamie Curry did, why they visit and why they love it so much, why they actually moved there and stayed there and are raising their kids there. That's how important it is. And what this plan wants to do is lease out areas where oil platforms will take away that view, will take away that skyline, will impact the environment to no end if there is an oil spill, and there will be an oil spill. I want you to listen to this interview because it's really important in how the oil and gas industry is not really benefiting the local community of Cook Inlet. That's really what it really comes down to. So here's the interview with Lauren Barrett and Jamie Curry from Inletkeeper on Cook Inlet. Enjoy the interview, and we'll talk to you after. Hey, Lauren. Hey, Jamie. Welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about Alaska's nature as well as the U.S. oil and gas leasing plan that just came out about a month ago?
Oh, yeah. Very excited to be here.
Right on. All right. Definitely. This is going to be fun. I am super excited because this is sort of not necessarily the last episode, but the last interview I'm doing before the public comment kind of shuts down for this U.S. oil and gas leasing plan across the U.S., where we're looking at, I believe it's 1.4 billion acres that it is pretty much opened up for leasing. And the public comment period is here. So what we're trying to do for this audience is to give you as much information as possible from different parts of the U.S. that may or may not be affected by this leasing plan, and sort of the history that they've had with the oil and gas industry, and also just talking about the nature, because I'm excited. Lauren and Jamie, we don't have a lot of Alaska people here, like people that live in Alaska. And although we've seen the beautiful pictures and the beautiful videos that people put up and all this kind of stuff, and we want to get to know a little bit more about Alaska and what it's like to live there and the beautiful nature that's about there. So we're going to talk a lot about different things. But before we do, I'd love to get to know you guys a little bit more so the audience can get to know you. So let's start with you, Lauren. Why don't you let us know who you are and what you do?
Hi, I'm Lauren Barrett. I am the co-executive director here at Cook Inletkeeper in Homer, Alaska, on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina people. So I help run this organization. I help do a lot of the fundraising here. And then in my spare time, I am mom to 2 little girls. So I am out enjoying the ocean and trying to keep them from eating too strange of kelp and, enjoying the
as kids do.
Living, as kids do. So, super excited to talk about Alaska and all the wonders that there are here.
That's awesome. I'm going to have questions about your kid. I have 2 girls as well. They're teenagers, so I could ask questions about that as well. Jamie, how about yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Jamie. I am the communications director for Cook Inletkeeper. When I'm not running communications for the organization, I dabble as well. I'm a filmmaker and science communicator, so I shoot documentary films, and I like to spend a lot of time running around outside with my camera,
Nice.
looking for wildlife and just beautiful things, which I have a fair amount to choose from here. So
I was about to say, you picked a pretty good place to do these types of documentaries and content, I guess is what it is now, right? And not only documentary filmmaking, but content, as a lot of people are doing. Look, both of you have titles and qualities that I love to talk about. So I'm super, super excited to talk about and get to know you a little bit more. Lauren, how old are your girls? Because I had two little girls at one point, and I fell in love with being a girl dad. And so I'd love to know more about your 2 little girls. How old are they?
So I have a 3 and a 6-year-old.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So 3 years apart. Are they close? Like, do they hang out with each other quite a bit?
Yes,
Get
they
along?
are. They are best friends, except for when they are not. So most of the time, they are best friends.
I'll tell you that doesn't stop. Just if they're anything. Mine are 2.5 years, almost 2 years apart, and they're 18 and 16 now. So it's a different. But I've loved every stage. It's a lot of fun. So, but they get to grow up in this beautiful place, like this.
Yeah.
Cook Inlet. You're in and around a wonderful place with beautiful nature, pretty much dominated by nature. It's not as developed as a lot of the other cities or places in the U.S. And obviously, it's I would say it's dominated by cold weather, really, and dark and light times, depending on the time of the year. It's a very, I guess, like a more extreme type of weather and type of environment to live in. Now, both of you didn't grow up in Alaska, but you both have lived there for 6 years. So we'll start with you, Lauren. What brought you up here and really made you fall in love with the place, like with Alaska itself?
Yeah, so I mean, really, actually, my girls are probably what brought me up here. I was born down in the Florida Keys, so I've always loved living by the coast, but then most of my adult life have lived in landlocked. I was in Montana for a long time. I did the Peace Corps down in Guyana.
Cool.
Kind of traveled around for a lot, and after we got pregnant with my first daughter, my husband and I, who was a guide in Yellowstone at the time, we were both like, wildlife and wild places are a thing that we really value, and we want our girls to grow up with access to a really wild place. And so we kind of on a whim came up, and it was his first time coming here, and I convinced him, and we found a little cabin and moved out here and haven't looked back. It's been a really, really special place to raise my kids, and a really wonderful tie-in now to work here and be able to really protect this place so that they continue to have this growing up. So they're often in the office with me. They think they're little Cook Inlet keepers, and they yell at people on the beach for littering. So it's wonderful.
I love it. I love it. Now, how hard was it for your husband to leave being a park ranger at Yellowstone, iconic national park? I know the U.S. has a number of national parks and they're all beautiful, but Yellowstone's a pretty iconic thing. I'm sure it was a dream of him. Was that a difficult decision for him to
Yeah,
make?
yeah, he was a wildlife guide. So lots of
Oh, sorry,
opportunities
wildlife
for
guide.
that up here. Yeah. Um, and as much as we love Yellowstone and we love the prairies and we love the bison, it was really neat to get to come up here and learn. I mean, it's really a whole learning about the coast and learning about the ocean is a whole new experience. And so it's
Yeah.
been really wonderful for both of us. It's
Oh, good.
never a dull moment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, Jamie, how about yourself? You came up here, I believe, for a master's degree in marine biology at Fairbanks. Talk a little bit about that and what made you want to stay in such a different environment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I grew up in Maine, so also kind of from I guess a slightly chillier environment at least.
Yeah,
Though
yeah.
not quite Alaska level, but still chilly. And yeah, I moved up here in 2020 because I landed a position to do a master's degree, to do a master's thesis looking at ocean acidification and
Interesting.
sort of climate change impacts in the Kachemak Bay area, so right outside of our door, basically.
Right.
And yeah, I came up here for that, and I was doing just had like just crazy adventures throughout graduate school, and was doing a lot of diving, and yeah, ran into crazy stuff like stellar sea lions underwater, and like just had a phenomenal experience, and
Right.
totally fell in love with this place, and just never wanted to leave. And I think that I work as I do a lot of like filmmaking and
Right.
science communication and photography, that kind of thing. And I think the thing that's just that I love so much about this place is that it's so easy to kind of show other people and to capture it and sort of bring it to others. And that's it is just it's a privilege to live in this place. And I think one of the things that drives me is wanting to share that.
Yeah, I love that. I'll start with you, Jamie. Like, what was the most surprising thing for you when you moved up here, good or bad, that you didn't expect when you first moved up here? I'll ask the same thing for Lauren, so we'll give Lauren a little time to think about that. But what was the thing where you're like, oh, I did not expect this?
Yeah, I think that I mean there was a bunch of stuff. I think I think I didn't expect that a large portion of the population doesn't have running water.
Interesting.
That was a surprise because it takes a lot of energy to heat pipes to keep the pipes thawed out here.
That's true.
So a lot of people live in sort of the dry cabin lifestyle. I had a lot of friends who did that in graduate school, and that was obviously a bit of a new experience. But it's really easy to kind of figure it out and have a great time doing it once you've done it for a little bit. But that was interesting, and I think the other thing that just amazed me was the size of the place, because I knew Alaska was big, but I did my master's degree. So I did all my coursework up in Fairbanks and all of my research down here in Homer. And it is pretty much a straight shot from one to the other. And it's a 12-hour drive. And that covers like, I don't know, a third of the state, quarter of the state.
Yeah.
And, it's just there's so much of it that doesn't have roads on it. It's just, it's just wild.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, I knew that on paper coming here, but it's one thing to kind of know that in theory, and it's a very different thing to kind of experience that
Oh yeah.
in person.
Absolutely, absolutely. How about yourself, Lauren? Like, what was the most surprising thing for you, your husband, like your family? Like, what was the thing that you're like, oh, I didn't expect that?
Yeah, that's a hard question. Alaska is so unique. I think probably initially the road system, I would say. Like you mentioned, I think before when we were chatting, we're at the end of the road. I live 15 miles outside of Homer, so there's 3 miles of road after me, and then you're done, which I love. I can see 3 glaciers from my living room window. It's pretty magical, but I'm used to having tons of like public access roads and public access cabins really easily available in Montana. And so just figuring out like how to get out and engage with nature has been really different here.
Mm.
And it's kind of a steep learning curve, but what I love about it is like you kind of have to dig into the community, because as soon as you start building up in the community, suddenly folks are taking you out and showing you where the trails are and showing you and taking you on their boats across the bay, and
Yep.
then kind of a whole world will open up to you. But you really can't be like the individual rugged explorer out here. You really need community to be able to get out, which is great. I think I like it about it.
Phenomenal. How did Jamie? You kind of mentioned how you know what led you to Inletkeeper in a way, because you did a lot of your work in Homer when you did your master's. You obviously you love communications, you love filmmaking, things like that. How did you end up working for Inletkeeper, or discovering, and did you do work with your masters with them? Did you use some of their resources, or like how did it all come about, I guess is the question.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird sort of chain of events, because I I had not actually encountered Inletkeeper, other than I'd seen the bumper stickers and the logo, which I'm wearing on my
Yes, I see.
Sweatshirt today. I'd seen that before, but I hadn't seen anything else of theirs. But I'd been working in and out of the Homer area for a couple of years, and I had gotten a fellowship after my master's degree ended, working for NOAA Fisheries. And, I was not totally sure what my career would be doing. And, I'd spent a couple of years trying to figure out, what I'd liked. I knew I wanted to do bring in sort of my filmmaking background, because I have a undergraduate degree in that. And, I wanted to do documentaries. I was making them for NOAA, but it was like a fellowship. And then, I saw this opening at Inletkeeper right around the same time as all the Doge cuts were happening at NOAA. And I was like, well, this is exactly where I want to be doing the kind of work that I want to be doing, that actually allows me to, have an opinion, and also to go to this amazing place and do good work for the environment out here. So I was just like, heck yeah. And so so I applied, and am still amazed that I got it. But it's awesome every day.
Yeah, well, I can see why you got it just from talking to you. It makes sense. I'm sure Lauren feels the same way. Lauren, you mentioned before you're co-executive director. How did all that come to be? Pretty big role. I know it's people are like, well, it could be like a smaller organization, but you probably have a lot on your plate as an organization in general. How did this role come up for you, and what led you to get a role like this?
Yeah, kind of roundabout, honestly. My undergraduate work was in environmental studies and creative writing. And then I graduated and had no idea what I wanted to do, so I joined the Peace Corps with the intention of working in they have an environmental program, but ended up doing education, actually. And so I really loved doing that work and doing the community building aspect of that work. So I came back and got a master's in international development and social change. And I was kind of moving more and more away from the environmental stuff, but it also has such a deep seed in my heart. My dad is a fly fishing guide. He's always been very involved in Bonefish Tarpon Trust and the work they do down there. And so it's always been in the vernacular of my family. And when I came here, I kind of worked a few different nonprofit jobs. I have a lot of experience with nonprofit management. And so I've always had my eye, before I moved to Homer, I had my eye on Cook Inletkeeper. And when this role became available, I'd been here about 4 years.
Yeah.
And it just felt like the perfect combination of all of my skills. And
sounds like it.
Yeah, I've having 2 young kids, if I'm going to work, I want to be doing something where I feel like I'm really putting my heart and soul into it. And so being able to do this has been the perfect marriage of all of the different pieces of my life.
Absolutely. For my own selfishness, how did you get the nonprofit experience? Were you just working in the nonprofit industry, or did you go back to school, or did you learn it in your master's? How did that work?
Yeah, so part of my master's has an element of grant writing and administration, and then I very randomly, because of work I'd done as like a volunteer when we were in Gardner, Montana, um, kind of stepped into the role of executive director. It's a very small town. It's like 300 folks.
Okay.
And so, but that was a great experience. I got to learn how to run a business, and I worked really closely with the National Park Service because we were right on the border. So I learned a lot during that job. And then moving here, I was the development director at our local NPR station.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I've gotten to dabble in a lot of different nonprofit structures.
Yeah. Oh, very, very cool. Very cool. Now, speaking of Inletkeeper, can you, Lauren, can you just talk about sort of the mission and what Inletkeeper does in and around the inlet and sort of the overall mission?
Yeah, so our mission is to protect the Cook Inlet watershed and all the life it sustains. Pretty broad mission, but we've done it for 30 years now. We do a lot of different things. We always talk about having this really unique mix of science, outreach, and advocacy. And so those are kind of our three branches. And so we try really hard to have this great balance of like stopping the bad and building the good. So, it's very easy, especially in like the year 2026, to be really focused on that stopping the bad. But we also want this element of building up our communities and making sure that they're able to thrive long term. So we do a lot of our capacity goes to like watershed wide campaigns where we're mobilizing folks like the 5-year plan on actions they can take to protect their lands and waters, really holding corporations and industry accountable. We do a lot of work on like mining campaigns right now in particular, a lot of work with oil and gas. And then the other part of our work is a lot of stuff on more like community building and a lot of climate change. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Project Drawdown. We've done some really similar models to that. So we've done really cool programs like helping to remove barriers to installing solar panels and improving local waste streams and working with the city for non-motorized transport. We've got a really neat one in Soldotna, which is our office just up the road from us, where they're taking volunteers out and mapping anadromous streams and helping to put those on the conservation maps. So it really spans what we do.
Yeah, it seems but that's what it goes for when you're managing a watershed, because it's not just oceans, it's fresh water, it's land, it's pretty much everything that encapsulate that watershed, because it all affects everything. Everything affects everything when it comes down to it. I love how you're not just attacking or protecting from the bad, but you're building up the good. And I think that's where conservation has gone more. I think we still have a lot of work to do, but I feel like that seems to be the motion in terms of doing a community building and making resilient communities or help building resilient communities. Now, obviously, Cook Inlet and the communities around it, probably a very unique characteristics of communities, indigenous, non-indigenous people living together. Are there any territorial lands along the Cook Inlet as well?
So I would say that there are lands that are historically different tribal territories in the area. So this is the ancestral home of the Dena'ina, the Supiaq, and the Alutiiq people of Alaska's south central region. And I mean, it currently holds 2/3 of Alaska's population is sort of this south central area of Alaska, which Cook Inlet it comprises a good portion of. So it is, historically, it has had a variety of traditional peoples out here that have been living in this place since time immemorial. Mm-hmm. There's still, there's, in terms of tribal lands specifically, mm-hmm. some tribes have areas that are owned by like tribal corporations out here, that sort of thing. Okay. But yeah, it's more, I would say, from a broad stroke standpoint, I think of it as more the totality of the land and waters are all originally are all traditional homelands of one or more peoples out here.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Alaska has a really unique, which I'm not even going to pretend to know well enough, but it has a really unique division because of Anilka. So there's native corporations, which is really different than the rest of the lower 48. So we do have a lot of tribal partners that we work with, like across the bay from us. We have Nanwalek, Seldovia, Port Graham. Just up the road, we have Ninilchik and Knightsey and Salamatov. So we work really closely with all of those guys. We have really long-standing partnerships with.
That's so cool. And it must, like, working with those types of partners and having those partnerships, especially with like in the way indigenous people have traditionally lived on land and the way they care for that land, has it influenced the way Cook Inlet looks at its programs and manages its programs in terms of using using those, those, I guess, thought processes or even conservation values in the way you do your work? Go ahead, Lauren.
Go ahead, Lauren. I was going to say both of us went to see both of us went to say absolutely on that. But Lauren, if you want to go ahead, Lauren, if you wanted.
No, I would say absolutely. I would say, like any environmental organization, there's always more to learn. And so it's something that we make a really concerted effort to be constantly learning and being really cognizant of and having conversations where we're getting that feedback. So, yeah.
Gotcha.
And I would just add that, a lot of the sort of foci of a lot of the things that our organization focus on are, in some way related to resources that are traditionally very, very important. So another of the many things that surprised me about Alaska when I came out here was the amount of subsistence harvesting that happens out here year to year. And that's, so it's people who are going out and either foraging or hunting or fishing for some, much, or almost all of their food sources. So, there are a lot of Alaska Native villages up here that pursue a majority subsistence lifestyle. And it's, millennia old, and it can supply up to 90% of the villagers' diet. So we're talking, going out and foraging for blueberries when it's blueberry season. And, there's a panoply of different berries and mushrooms, and then there's hunting. And then, of course, we have our massive annual salmon runs every year. What's actually amazing is that you can kind of experience this in any sort of context. So one of my favorite things to do is to go out and go berry foraging during the late summer. And you can't. That was a new thing for me because that abundance of the resources out here, the fact that you can kind of just wander into the hills and find enough blueberries just for yourself to fill, a couple of gallons to have through the winter or more if you want, but or if you need, I should say. And you can just go out, or you could go out during the late summer and actually fish. And I am not by any means an expert fisherman. And I went out with my fiance at the time, who she also is not an expert fisherwoman. And it was the sockeye were running up the Kenai River. And she whomped about 5 fish out of the water in about 45 minutes. It was so fast that I couldn't actually do any fishing because I had to keep rushing up to her with a net to try to catch the thing. And she's, and it's that level of abundance that is up here still, that is, so crucial to many of the traditions and lifestyles and livelihoods up here. And that's one of the major things that I think Inletkeeper focuses on, protecting and making sure that it is present for future generations.
I think that's so interesting because, like, when I think of, salmon runs, I don't think of it as being plentiful. Like because you hear the, in BC especially, like British Columbia especially, you hear like the ups and downs that they have. It's nice to hear that you can go out and just catch it. And this is not the only time I heard, as I mentioned before we started the interview, I worked up in the Beaufort on the Canadian side, And speaking to the Inuvialuits there, they were saying, yeah, we can go out and get Arctic char like that. Like we can get 5 in like a half hour, and you're just like, what? It's like, how is that? And like massive ones too, and you're just like, how does that happen? Like that's amazing. And they're like, yeah, there is stuff here, and it's great to do that, but we want to keep it that way, and we want to make sure that it stays balanced. Yeah, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would definitely put in a caveat that our salmon are not, from a historical standpoint, doing well. I would say,
of course,
that is we're way below where we ought to be right now.
Right.
And this is at sort of us at low ebb, and things are looking a bit concerning. But it is. I would say that this is one of the last places on Earth where you can do that. Gotcha. And one of the privileges of living up here is that it offers you a window into what the rest of, at least North America, used to be like. Because this level of abundance, ecologically, used to be present throughout North America, and it's not anymore. And it's easy to lose sight of that, across generations. As time has gone on, people are like, oh, well, it's normal that it's very difficult or impossible for us to catch fish, and salmon don't run up here, and we can't find a ton of berries out in the wild. That's just not how it is out here. But it used to be. Right.
So that makes it's all about the frame of reference too, right? When you were there. That's really interesting. You talk about challenges of the salmon run and how that's not what it used to be. Lauren, what are some of the major challenges that the Inletkeeper faces or helps with in terms of their programs?
Yeah, it changes. And this year in particular, it's changing quite rapidly. Oil and gas from the very beginning has been one that we've always stayed engaged on. We're really the only group in Cook Inlet that's working on that. So we tend to lead the charge there. I mentioned that we're doing a lot of work on mining projects. There's several really big ones that are also getting fast-tracked under this administration. There's one across the bay from us in Lake Clark National Park, actually, on a private land holding there. That's a gold mine. That would be the death knell for the critically endangered Cook Inlet beluga whale. So we're doing a lot of work there on trying to make sure that the newest science is actually getting in front of decision makers and that they're aware of what they're allowing to happen. There's the Donlin mine, which is up on the Kuskokwim, which is another giant salmon tributary and a really important cultural and ecological source for our tribes up there. And that's another gold mine. And so a lot of these mines, they're these big extractive industries that are coming in and purporting like, oh, we're going to put something here. There's nothing here. And like Jamie was saying, there is a lot here. It's quite abundant. And these are things that we rely on. So we do a lot of watchdogging for that. And I'm losing myself in your question. But yes, so those are some of the big ones that we're working on. Pebble Mine is one that I'm sure many of your listeners have heard about. That's one that we've worked on from the very beginning. And then our science work kind of helps bridge the gap with all of that. So we actually just finished up, our long-term science director just retired, and she was amazing and created this 20-year long data set on stream temperature monitoring that she really piloted and then helped spread out across the state. So we have this amazing data set that's telling us where is the cold water refugia, what areas do we really need to focus our conservation efforts on, where do we need to be really concerned, what's impacting our salmon.
Wow.
And we use salmon. We're going to talk about salmon a lot.
Yeah, understood.
Because it's absolutely like the central figure of Alaskan life, and it also is a really great indicator for everything else. So, if your salmon are affected, your beluga are affected. If your salmon are affected, it's probably your bidarkie are affected. If your salmon are affected, your bears are unhappy. So, we're going to talk about salmon. Salmon is a really great guiding.
It's that indicator species, right?
Yeah,
like
indicator
species. Yeah.
And talking point. It's really bipartisan. Everybody up here eats salmon, fishes for salmon, depends on salmon across the board.
What's interesting, like when I worked as a marine mammal observer, there was obviously, like in the U.S., it seems like there were a lot more regulations, with the Marine Mammal Protection Act, so that like you couldn't. The rules apply to not only whales about noise when they do seismic surveys, but also to seals and sea lions and so forth. In Canada, it was just whales that we had to look after. Now with mines, I worked as an environmental consultant in Canada with mines and sort of the discharges into rivers, and we used to have like the metal mining effluent regulations. So there was like a very stringent rule that every mine had to abide by, and they had to make sure that they weren't affecting the reference sites or the downstream sites compared to the reference sites. And we looked at a bunch of different indicators. Obviously, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, very, very important. I know it's under threat right now, and we could probably do an entire episode just on that. But with all the mines that you mentioned, seems like that's a big topic in your area. Are there regulations surrounding effluent, so the discharge from metal mining, and other things that you can use as sort of like an indicator of how the established mines are affecting the rivers, and what new mines need to look out for, or what compared to what old mines may have gotten away with in the past? And Jamie, I'll let you or whoever would like to answer that. But
I'm not sure the answer for that one. You would have to pull in like our program expert. The one specifically that I'm referring to the whales on, our biggest immediate concern is they would need a deep sea port. A lot of Alaska, like just because it's not developed for industry, a lot of the concerns are just like these road systems that have to be put in, or the ports that have to be put in, even to begin to develop these things. And in putting those in, you're going across really critical migration pathways, tons of anadromous streams.
Yeah.
And the deep sea port in this case would be going into what we just discovered in 2023, I believe, is the winter foraging grounds for Cook Inlet belugas. So it is right now, right off of a national park. It is like this perfect little quiet oasis, where they can go and they can eat and they can have their babies and be safe. And putting a deep sea port in there, just the installation of the port alone, the noise from that would be really catastrophic.
This is why I love talking to people who would live in the local community, because these are the stuff that we don't realize when we hear about mines, like the deep sea ports. Like same thing with what's going on with pipelines, is like they have to go to a deep sea port in BC because that's how we get the big ships in and out, right? And then we don't know what's being affected by those areas already. And so this is why I love talking to people like yourselves, because you can make that enlightened for the audience. So when we talk about a mine, it's not just a mine that, like the physical aspect of putting the mine in, it's the roads that go in that are built, it's the habitat that's displaced, it's the deep sea ports that are going in, and the animals that use that. As we just mentioned, the belugas it's an important winter foraging area. Like this all matters when we look at this, and I think going into oil and gas, which we can talk about now, is we don't realize the setup and the infrastructure that needs to be added into a place that is dominated by this beautiful wilderness, and that people have been living here and enjoying and living under and with in unison for thousands of years. And so to have someone come up and just be like, someone in DC to be like, hey, we're like, Alaska's great, but the oil is better, and we're going to make so much money off the oil, which we've probably heard the rhetoric. I'm not going to mention who says that. And, but not understanding all the stuff that needs to be built around it and the history around it. So let's talk about, there's a lot of history, as you mentioned, Lauren, in terms of oil and gas and LNG and everything like that within Alaska. Can you talk about how that history has influenced life in and around Cook Inlet, or even just Alaska in general?
Yeah, Jamie, you looked like you maybe wanted to.
No, I'm thinking, I'm pulling ideas together. So let me just taking this idea and putting this one here. Lauren, I don't know if you wanted to lead the charge, or I can on that. But I don't know. Do you have a strong feeling?
No, I mean, I think it's, when we're looking at specifically oil and gas, it's been a really mixed bag. And one of the things we can talk about is maybe a little bit of the dependency trap and SB 92 that we're looking at right now. Yeah. I think oil and gas has this very lovely mystique of it's going to bring in jobs and it's going to bring in money. And we just know that narrative has changed, that it's just no longer true. It's very antiquated. And it, this is a lot I am still learning, so that's why I'm kind of like pausing, because Alaskans are very smart and very involved in their politics, and so I don't want to step on anybody's toes. But,
Understood.
We used to, like, we have this Alaska Permanent Fund, and so oil and gas used to be a big part of revenue for Alaska, and that has diminished more and more. And I'll let Jamie speak more on the SB 92 stuff because he prepped for that better. But there are a lot of loopholes right now that are allowing, specifically Hillcore, who's the only really invested as far as offshore up here, to come in and drill and not pay any income tax on it. So that money is not staying in Alaska. And it's been really detrimental to our schools, to our roads, to our healthcare system. And I'm going to be quiet now and let you speak, Jamie.
Well, yeah. And I mean, yeah, Lauren basically did a great summary of it. But so, I mean, obviously Alaska has a long and involved history with extractive industries, including oil and gas. And I mean, actually, Cook Inletkeeper got its start after the Exxon Valdez disaster. So, most expensive oil spill in human history. And it happened in Prince William Sound, which was, I mean, on the map, it looks next door to us. We were getting oil up here in Cook Inlet. We're hundreds of miles away, for reference. And it was absolutely massive. And there have been bigger ones, but this one was huge, and in this really beautiful area of Alaska. And it is, we have this really involved history with both that industry and the dangers that are associated with it. I'd say one of the things recently, so our state, obviously, the state, has a large sort of financial, I guess, stake in industries like oil and gas, and it has created something that is called a dependency trap, where we're sort of forced into a situation that is not ideal for us because we believe that we are sort of dependent upon this resource being extracted or used in a certain way. So prior to 2018, our oil royalties and taxes were the vast majority of our state revenue. But since then, there's been a combination of lower oil prices and like tax giveaways that have really changed the landscape. So Hillcore is one of the biggest, for instance, is one of the biggest oil and gas companies operating in Alaska. Yep. And it's privately owned. So it's what's called an S corporation under U.S. tax code. And that's in contrast to like C corporations that are owned by stockholders who, trade ownership and shares in public markets. Hillcore is privately owned. Alaska has adopted these S Corp versus C Corp designations into its tax system, but it taxes S corporations, privately owned corporations, based on personal income tax on the returns to their owners, rather than the corporates, like the total corporation income tax. And Alaska doesn't have personal income tax, and so that means because Hillcore is privately owned, pretty much the vast majority of their revenues aren't taxed at all. So basically, they are allowed to go in public waters and extract this public resource for profit, but all of that profit, all of those resources go straight out of the state because we're not actually able to tax them. And, that's become a political flashpoint in recent years. Some policymakers are advancing a bill called SB 92, which is a Senate bill in the Alaska legislature that's aimed at closing that S corporation loophole. But they're getting a lot of opposition by political opponents from one particular party who are saying that it's unfairly targeting oil companies like Hillcore. And I don't know. to me, that's kind of nonsensical because, I am a small business owner and I do stuff on the side, and I have to pay taxes
Yeah.
I have to pay state tax on my small business.
Yeah.
And if I have to pay my fair share, it is always just staggering to me that a mega corporation like Hillcore doesn't have to, as they would have to in any other state in the US. And also that people are insisting that it's not fair to tax a company that size, while, it's like, well, I'm paying.
Yeah.
I'm paying. What are they doing?
Well, and my first thought of looking in from outside is like they're doing this on purpose. Like they did this as like they probably incorporated as that, knowing like in certain states that they can get away with this. And this is what ticks me off is, that, like you said, Lauren, at the beginning of this conversation about oil and gas, is the traditional selling point of like, hey, it brings in jobs, it brings in, money to the state or money to the local area. That's just not true anymore, because these corporations will try and get away with whatever they can to get whatever money they can and out the state and going somewhere else. I don't know where is Hillcorp a U.S. company? Is it traditionally U.S. company? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you're just like, it just like, even just the fact that they don't do anything for the state, knowing that they get a lot of their profits from the state, it bothers me to no end. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the state that's giving you everything. You know what you're doing to it in the long run, and you're not going to give any money. So that's frustrating. How do like Alaskans look at that, and like, how do they treat that company, or even just like, what's their outlook on that company?
Yeah, I mean, Hillcore has an awful reputation, well-deserved awful reputation in this state.
Right.
They've been fined, I believe, 20 times. They were just fined in November. They've had gas leaks before. And they really are the only one, when we get into a little bit more specifics on the 5-year plan, when we look at what has been leased in Alaska, it's mostly state waters. And that's Hillcore. They have 137, I believe, leases in state waters. They have some in federal waters that are inactive already. And we, being the communities of Cook Inlet, have stood up kind of time and time again. It's been incredibly frustrating. We were removed from the 10th 5-year plan, which was supposed to still be active. It was supposed to start in 2024. And so to have us be put back in again after folks have already said, we have great industries here that are all absolutely dependent on the health of our salmon and our clean water. We have commercial fishing, sport fishing, ecotourism, and then we, of course, have our subsistence use. And so putting that at risk for an industry to come in and do exploration work, which just the exploration work alone is really detrimental. It's not something that folks here want. And I won't say it's been completely bipartisan. I think that wouldn't be fair to say, but I think in a large part, folks are in agreement that our salmon resources and our water resources are much more valuable to us long term.
Right. So that's been expressed on a number of different levels, in a number of different ways. Now you mentioned that they're like, Hillcorp is still doing some drilling and they're getting their money. You mentioned there's some other leasing things that are going on top of, like, so we're here to talk about the U.S. oil and gas plan for the most part, but there's other things that are happening before this got put together. Can you talk a little bit about, Lauren, that those leases and how that's complicating just life in general, and then what this U.S. plan adds on to that?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a little complicated, so bear with me and tell me if I'm getting in the weeds, but
no worries.
We are calling this like the dirty dozen. This is what we've been working on since the end of last year, when all of a sudden all these leasing authorities opened up. So it kind of kicked off. There was I believe it was the 9th OCS, Outer Continental Shelf Plan, there was lease sale 258, which Hillcore did bid and they were awarded. And after they did their initial NEPA review, we took them to court along with several other partners, because they did the whole environmental impact review in like 4 months, and it was just incomplete. So there was a lot of things that we were like, yeah, you didn't consider this, or this.
Right.
And the district court agreed with us, and so they ordered them to do another EIS. Typically, when they do a supplemental EIS, BOEM would have hosted public hearings, public comments, done a full review, which was their intention until the Trump administration made some changes to NEPA and kind of made the language a little more cloudy. And then it was, we are not having any public comments. It will be out by the end of the year. It's out, it's finalized, Hillcore's back in. So that was the first one. So that was happening. And then simultaneously, we had the 5-year plan that I mentioned, the 10th one, that we had worked really hard with coalitions across the nation to get Cook Inlet removed from. We had Cook Inlet removed from that plan. We were not slated for any, and then it was snuck into the big beautiful bill. So then we have 6 mandated by Congress lease sales that are going to start in March. So those are already happening, and because they're part of a reconciliation bill, there's not a lot of process that they need to go through for those. Though there's more process than they are currently doing. So that's all I'm allowed to say on that one. And then, and then we, right at Thanksgiving time, we hear, here's your new 5-year plan, and Cook Inlet is back on, and here's 5 potential more. So that's 6 total that are all overlapping with a really just an incredible lack of public process, which is really astounding. And I think no matter where you fall on the issue, you should have a say. And, we were talking earlier, like local expertise is not, it's not just kind of like a box to check. It really is essential, especially in a place like Alaska. We're so far removed from the people who are making these decisions. And there's no way that they could know some of these things. They need to hear from the fishermen who are out there, who know the tides, who know the wind patterns, who know what the reality of actually trying to do any kind of development in those areas is going to be. And the OCS does have a public comment period, so we want folks to get in there and comment on it. They've made it this very short period over the holidays, which we believe was intentional. And, folks are tired. Folks already commented on this just a few years ago.
Right.
So it's hard to go back and say, we know you won, but you got to do it again. But it did make a difference that first time, and they do have to take it into account. So it is really important that we kind of keep beating that drum.
So you can still use the 2 years ago, the process as a little bit of this process to say, hey, we beat it once, we can beat it again. Yeah. And how have people reacted to sort of that mindset?
I would say the people in our community are wonderful. Alaskans, more than anywhere else I've ever lived, people are involved.
Yeah.
They want to know, they want to be part of the process. And, Jamie and I are newer to Alaska and we're newer to this organization, but we have folks here who've been working on this for 30 years.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, here we go again. I'm ready. Let me bust out the language. So people are ready.
Well, I think they're ready, and they've also learned the tricks. You know what I mean? Through maybe some hard times and some hard lessons learned. But they know it's not going to stop. They know it's going to keep coming, and they're resilient in that way where it's like, okay. And luckily they've had some success in the past to be able to build on, to put this through. And let's be honest too, like the last Trump administration, they had a very similar, lease sale, and it didn't go through, or it never ended up going through for whatever reason. Hopefully that happens again this time. We're starting to see a lot of public participation in the deep sea mining, public comment periods and things like that. I assume we're going to see the same thing for this public comment period. I assume you're expecting an overwhelming no from the public comment period here, and how are you as an organization, and Jamie, because you're the communications director, maybe you can do it. How are you sort of guiding people to help do have the biggest bang for their buck in terms of putting the public comment in and being effective?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a bunch of resources that we're making available for people to go to kind of help guide them through this process. So on our website, we have a page that is actually dedicated to oil and gas lease sales. And on that page, we've got like talking points that people can use. We've got the link to the actual place where they can go to submit the comments. And in a couple of hours, at 5:30 today, we're going to be doing a online like video training session where we can kind of walk people through the issue and how to go about commenting on it. And we're going to record that and put that up online as well. So we're just trying to get as much as we can out there for people to both be aware that this is happening and that, this thing that's happening over the holidays that is trying to be stuck under their nose is happening right now, and they've got to get a comment in by January 23rd, especially because we've got, like Lauren said, we've got 12 lease sales that have either happened or are about to happen in Cook Inlet alone. And this is because of the various loopholes that the federal government has been using to constrain public comment. This is potentially like the only opportunity that people are going to get to actually make a public comment. So it's like, okay, we get one shot at this. So we're trying to really emphasize online that this is a particularly important time.
And and do people have to be like people who care for Cook Inlet may not live in Cook, like a person like myself or someone else in the lower 48, they can still comment for Cook Inlet, like, you know what I mean? Like they can still mention it in the public comments. I'm just gonna as you're looking to answer that, I'm gonna just put up if you go to speakupforblue.com Cook Inlet, it'll take you. I'm gonna link to this page with the what you mentioned, Jamie, the oil and gas lease page on Cook Inlet's on Inletkeeper's website, because it's phenomenal. It gives you everything you need to know. It has a timeline going back from 2017 to 2018, and a lot of like sort of the things that happened there. I think it's fantastic. So I just want to let people know. So speakupforblue.com / let's do Inletkeeper. We'll do Inletkeeper, and then so that you can go there to take a look. But it's like, so if people from outside the lower 48s, Lauren, can actually put up public comment and then put their, say, hey, we love Alaska the way it is, leave it alone. Like, don't touch it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. These are a lot, whether it's for Alaska or anywhere, all of these coasts across the nation are up. And they're public waters. They are waterways that we, as U.S. citizens, they are ours. And so I really strongly believe that it's a national resource. Having these wild fisheries is going to be essential for long-term food security, I just can't even imagine a world where we don't have our wild fisheries. It breaks my heart. And so absolutely, if you care about fisheries, if you visited, so many people come out and visit like Lake Clark and Katmai and Homer and come halibut fishing here. If you've been here, and most of those folks actually surprisingly do, because it really does captivate you once you've been here once. It's hard not to fall in love with it, and hard to imagine it not being here anymore.
And I think throughout the episode you mentioned something really important. It's oil and gas is not the most important industry, within like the Cook Inlet area. And I think that's a really important thing to say. I think the narrative from a federal perspective is that it is, but like you said, it's the wild in general, but also the fisheries is such an important aspect, and it outweighs from a financial perspective what oil and gas will give, because right now oil and gas is giving jack all to the people of Alaska, and I think that's a big thing to mention here, because that it just can't happen where you don't the local community doesn't benefit in whatever way, whatever their biggest stakeholder group is. That stakeholder group needs to benefit, and we know it's not oil and gas, and so I think that's a major point to put like in the public comment is like, like this is not important to us. We care about fisheries, we care about wildlife. That's what's important to us. That's what brings in the money for us. That's what encapsulates us as a community, as a state, right? So I think that's really important. Okay, so I will let people know. So speakupforblue.com / Inletkeeper. You can go there. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll also, if you can, Jamie, and once you've done that, once you've put up that webinar that you're putting on, if you can send the link, we'll put it in the show notes as well, so that by the time we publish this episode, that'll be up so people can take a look too, to find out more what they can do to put on the public comment, because I think that'll be really handy, because it's not just writing something, it's what you write to make so make use of this page that they put up, the Inletkeeper put up, and it'll be really great. So I guess, like, in terms of is there anything else that you want to cover that we haven't covered here, where that would be important for you to get out so that people can can take hold of?
I think there's certainly the first thing that comes to mind for me is the like just reinforcing the idea that everything in this watershed is built on the back of our fisheries and our salmon. And that's true for both the people and for the environment here. So, the bears are reliant on the salmon. The salmon swim upstream every year to spawn. And then, after they've spawned, they perish. And all that nitrogen from their bodies feeds into the forests up here. The trees are reliant on and are built on salmon up here. The birds are reliant on it. This place is this sort of one of the last sort of bastions of this sort of wilderness. And not only is the ecosystem built on salmon, but our economies are here. And between the millions of dollars brought in just in this region alone in tourism, ecotourism, bear viewing, charter fishing, commercial fishing, that all brings so much more to the table than extractive processes like oil drilling possibly could, and the risk posed by oil drilling in this area is immense, because each of these lease sales that happen, like the most recent one, lease sale 258, there was they did a model on it, on sort of the risk of a major spill that was associated with this particular lease sale. And they estimated that there was about a 19% chance of a major spill happening. So this is the kind of thing that would be, destructive across the board and could, choke out our fish, and also be just immensely destructive to wildlife, both in the ocean and also on land. And that's just one lease sale. When you start adding up the fact that we already have a bunch of sort of extractive industries further up the inlet, plus each new lease sale coming in having its own risk associated, that risk becomes additive. So lease sale 258 is 20%. When you add on the lease sale before that, it becomes 40%. And when you account for all of the current leases that are already happening in Cook Inlet, we're already hovering well over 50% chance of a risk of a major oil spill in the area. And that's before we start adding even more to the region. So, when you think about what's at stake here, the risk to this place is so high, and the probability of a major oil spill is so high. And when you think about like the value of this place and how all of that could disappear, thinking about it from a local standpoint, if you want to bet all of the beauty of this place and your livelihood and like the local economy and like your subsistence way of life on a poker hand that you have a 7 out of 10 chance of losing, is it really worth the risk,
Well, it almost comes down to, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Mm-hmm. That's really what that's what we're talking about here. I remember there was a quote from a Shell executive, which is like, spills are part of business, but that's part of their business, not the business of the local people, not the business of the fishers, not the business of people who live off the land, just like as you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, and all the stuff that's affected afterwards. Like you mentioned, salmon go up and spawn up in the headwaters. They will die. their nitrogen goes into the forests grow from that, and it's just a regenerative, positive feedback. That gets interrupted, a lot of stuff goes to hell. Like, let's be honest here, from a nature perspective, but also from a human perspective. And in these types of environments like Alaska, they cannot handle big changes like that. And for people who come in and just take money and bring it out and don't even support the community, it's just like it's a non-starter for me, right? I think it's easy to say that it's a non-starter. Lauren, just in terms of final thoughts, do you have anything, from Inletkeeper? I know that's a big talking point here, but
I'm jotting stuff down. I would love to leave people with a little bit of hope that like their actions really are going to make a difference. I think this last year, I know many of us felt just pummeled, whether it was from an environmental or humanitarian, so many things have been happening in the world, and it can feel incredibly overwhelming. And like sitting down to write a 10-minute email is not going to make much of a difference.
Right.
But it really does. And we've seen that time and time again. And so I really encourage people. I understand it's a very complicated narrative. Even for us who are working in it, we're like, okay, make sure we're understanding the tax codes, make sure we're understanding the implications of this Protection Act, and now NEPA has changed, and it's changing very quickly, and so we don't expect anyone to be an expert, unless you are an expert, and then we really need your comments.
Yes, absolutely.
But what we also need is just the public. The public needs to speak up that this is a resource that is already in use and is already important, and so personal stories really, really do matter, and if you can take 10 minutes to write something, it will make a difference. And
lifetime of a
really
difference.
Good about that. For you, for future generations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For your kids, Lauren, for your girls growing up in that area.
My kids can still go eat sea lettuce when we go down to the beach. Please write a comment.
Absolutely. Lauren and Jamie, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me today and with us, here at How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Like, the audience loves the fact that we can hear from people from all over the U.S. And how they feel about this. And just to give it context, to give, from a local context of like what's really important to the people, and how these major plans that are put off, that are made by people who don't even live there, or maybe never have been there, or never will be there, how it affects local people. And I think it's a really big tell in terms of just not understanding what's local and how important it is. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all the information. Love to have you back on to talk about all the other wonderful work that you guys do, because I think it's really important, and it was just so much fun talking to both of you. So I appreciate you spending that time with me.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you and your listeners and everyone who has a stake in protecting our oceans.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Jamie, for joining us on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. This was revelations like I've never seen before. It's not what I thought it would be. A lot of times when we talk about oil and gas moving into a coastline, especially with the history that Alaska has had, you don't expect somebody who's never been to Alaska, and I've been to the Northwest Territories and so forth, you don't really understand how important little things are there and how important it is to the community, and that oil and gas may not be the biggest industry that's benefiting that local community. And in this case, that's what Jamie and Lauren have said over and over and over again, is that the fishing is what's the biggest financial impact to the community, not only from an environmental perspective, but actually from a monetary perspective. The oil and gas industry, the way it's set up now, is not benefiting the community in any way other than the potential of oil spills. And what Jamie mentioned in terms of the percentage of risk that there is from an oil spill at 90%, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. 90% chance that there's going to be an oil spill. That is going to affect this inlet for decades, if not more. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when oil spills are going to happen in this area. And without that, we're not going to see a change. We're not going to see a benefit to this community from a monetary perspective, from an environmental perspective, from a health perspective. We are going to see a detriment to this community. That's not said on the federal level, on the overview level of what they're saying in the press conferences and things like this. We have seen it time and time again. We have seen it on the coast of California. We have seen it in the Gulf, and we've seen it here in Cook Inlet. How many more interviews do I have to do to just tell us everybody's like, hey, this isn't good for the people. It's not good for the people. Not the way it was before, if it was, and the long-term hazards are outweighing the benefits, if there are any. So keep that in mind. Go to speakupforblue.com/inletkeeper. They have a page there all about the oil and gas lease sales. But also in there, what's really important is they have a 5-year plan talking points, and they have a link to submit a comment about the 5-year plan. It's not just for the Cook Inlet, it's for all of the U.S. 1.4 billion acres of U.S. is up for grabs on leases. That shouldn't happen. And so make your comment, whether you're a U.S. citizen or a non-U.S. citizen. If you don't want to see the environment go to hell, then this is what we need to do. We are way past the stage of needing this amount of drilling, and we have the ability for renewals to help. And so this administration needs to hear that. And so they hear it through you, the people. So if you're listening to this and you really believe in this, go to speakupforblue.com/inletkeeper and submit your comment today. I'm going to also link to the webinar of a workshop that Jamie and Lauren and the Cook Inlet Keepers are putting on. I would love you, if you want to watch that, you can watch that just to get a little bit more involved and find out what you can do for the most impactful public comment that you can put together. I want to thank Lauren and Jamie for joining me today. I want to thank the Inlet Keeper at Cook Inlet for all the work that they do and all the people around there that live there, and for spending time with me today to talk to us and say, hey, you know what? This isn't a good idea. And this is why. So thank you so much for that. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section below if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on your favorite audio podcast, you can go to speakupforblue.com/feedback. You can leave a voicemail or you can leave a comment. I would love to hear what you have to say. This is the beginning of a conversation, and I'd love to continue that conversation with you either on social media, Instagram, How to Protect the Ocean, TikTok, Speak Up for Blue, all of this. We're everywhere. We're just everywhere. Just go to the website, speakupforblue.com. I want to thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Angelo, and from the True North, Strong and Free. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.